Hello, it's Bethany. I'm a lower elementary Montessori teacher, and today I'm going to be talking about what Montessori says about reading. So, when I did my training, they have you go through all of her books, and in my specific training, they said, okay, read this section, this summer, this section in the spring, these quotes, because we had to go through and get quotes. And when you read a book like that, it was hard to grasp everything. And also, I now have a lot more years of experience since my training, and I was like, well, let me go back and read some of what Montessori says about certain things just to refresh and just to see what it is. And I've grasped it so much more now reading it, seeing the kids learn and everything. So I'm hosting monthly little passage readings, so we're not reading like a whole book, but tomorrow on Tuesday, January 27th, 2026 at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time, I'm doing with my Parts of the Language LLC business a live talk for 30 minutes. It's more of a discussion with other teachers. There's some people signed up for it, so if you want to get in, you can. And if you've missed this one or you're watching it later, you can join next month and we'll see what we read about then. But so we just did the passage from the Advanced Montessori Method number 2 for elementary and just the reading section. And I have some thoughts and I'm going to share them now before our live talk, just because I'm excited to see what other people say, and I'll share what I want to say, but I don't want to take up all the time just saying my opinions and what I think of it. So the first thing I want to say about it, and I'll read some passages from here, but she talks a lot about reading as a dramatic art, and that helps the students learn, which is true. It was interesting. I suppose in her readings for the writings and the teachings for the early childhood, that's when they learn to read, even though a lot of our students still in first, second, and third grade are still learning to read. It doesn't mention so much of that. It's more of how do they comprehend and the reading comprehension of it all, which is what we also work on with our students. So she mentions a lot of things about reading aloud, and there's a few different things that I will tell you about that. It's a way for them to learn how to read, because that goes again with the dramatic thing. It's our intonation, our expressions in our face to convey a language, which is truly what we want them to be able to do, is to communicate. And just everybody does reading comprehension, but this is a way to have them show or listen and try to show what they know. But there's a few different things about reading aloud that I'm going to mention. First, this is a quote from the book. It says, "That is, the children, in order to prove to us that they have understood something read aloud, should be able to repeat it in narrative form what they have read aloud." So, whether it be them or somebody else reading it aloud, they should try to tell you what you have read, which is a very common thing in any type of schooling. But what is interesting, and this actually, I tried it in my classroom a few years ago, and what's interesting about this part is because she says reading should be done during art time. Now let me go, or drawing hour. So let me tell you, she says, this is a quote too, "We have found the drawing hour best adapted for this work. It is our experience that it is easier to gain a hearing when the children are busy with something which does not require great concentration and which is not sustained by any particular inspiration." So I tried it one year, because one year I had a group of students that didn't want to pay attention during reading, and how we think, or traditional teachers think, I've only ever taught Montessori, but when I think, because my classroom has an observation window and people walk by and they see I'm up there with a book and no one's paying attention, or some students aren't paying attention, why is that? And it makes teachers think, oh, well, that's bad on us, they're not listening, whatever. So since that was happening, not the people walking by, no one ever mentioned anything to me, it's just in our own heads we think, what are they supposed to be doing? In a traditional sense, we think they're supposed to be staring at the teacher with the book and paying sole focus attention on the book. And that's one of the times in which kids in Montessori get that practice, is just listening, because we don't stand in front of a classroom all day. So it does help them practice their listening skills. But with that year, I was like, okay, I made a paper that's in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday in a little box, and they could draw in that box for when we read aloud. And it was interesting because not only did the students draw in the box and it kept them quiet and listening, but some students even showed their reading comprehension by drawing what was being read, which was very cool. And I did this with when I read a longer chapter book. And sometimes we did it with picture books and stuff, but usually picture books didn't have enough time to even like draw a lot for it. I like longer picture books, as I explained in a different video, but so I mostly did it when we read chapter books. So that's interesting. But she also says something about reading aloud, which is interesting because this happens anyway in our classroom. So the thing is, what's interesting with this one is that Montessori says that students should be able to interrupt while you're reading. In traditional schools, absolutely not. That's not about to happen. But how can we stop that? And she says, and this is a quote from this book too, which we always have to take with a grain of salt because I know it was written a long time ago, but some of these still hold up. While the child is telling his story, there is a constant suppression of interruptions. Hush, I did not call on you. Wait till you are called on. It is not polite to interrupt somebody who is talking, etc. It is clear that the teacher will never learn anything about her pupils this way. I'm going to stop here for a second, but there's a second part to that. So she's saying that part of the observation is to let students say out loud what they are thinking, which is interesting because, and I do this half and half. If the student keeps interrupting and it has nothing to do about the reading, then yeah, no, it's not your time to talk. But if it's about the reading and they keep interrupting, then that's different. And you could say, okay, well, what are they remembering from that? Why is that so interesting to them? Those type of things to see, oh wait, they are comprehending the story, which is just very interesting. But the second sentence right after that in reading says, this explains, from her book, it says, this explains why, from the psychological point of view, our present-day schools have not been able to contribute anything new to a reformed scientific pedagogy of reading. Because we have to remember, and again, this was written quite a while ago, but have traditional schools changed that much? And now this is not a video to discuss that topic, but it's just interesting to point out that like schools were invented so people would learn how to sit at a factory desk and do a task given to them, which is obviously the exact opposite of Montessori and why she made this, but they're still doing it today like that. And so it just kind of, I thought it was interesting she put that in the reading section of her book, so that it's like, oh, she's thinking like we should let the students interrupt, not say, shh, just sit there and listen, because students aren't designed that way and children aren't designed that way, and we know that as Montessori teachers. But if you're teaching in the traditional sense, and again, it goes to that thing, it's like if like a principal walks by and says, why aren't these kids looking? And maybe someone, and they would observe and say, you know, and I've never been told anything about it, but in your mind as a teacher, like they should be doing this, but now you can back it up with Montessori's words. No, they should be interrupting if it's appropriate to interrupt at that time in that section. So that's that on reading aloud. And then at the very end of this, she mentions, and I'm obviously just picking out things I want to talk about. There's a lot more in the reading section, but there's two more sections I want to say something about. And the first one is the 3 R's. And Montessori wrote this. She says, as the ancients said, necessary education is the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, for these are things which the child cannot discover by himself. And these still are the biggest 3 things that we focus on teaching the children in the school. And can we discover them by ourselves? And then Montessori goes on to say, she says, if you give the child the tools, he will be able to uncover many of life's secrets by himself, which is the whole thing. We give them the tools in Montessori and then they discover it by themselves. So then that helps them learn even more. And then while the 3 R's, are a big thing. Reading to teach the cultural subjects is a big thing in this too. And that's what I always tell the parents and the students. I feel like in my classroom, we spend a lot of time on the cultural subjects, just because they're the most fun things, and the students still get their math and reading and, math and language and cultural because it's a balanced thing. But the cultural works take the longest. Their students are interested on it. So what I always tell the parents is that in the cultural subjects, they're focused on the reading and writing. And I notice when I bring that up in conferences, they're like, oh yeah, the cultural stuff, like they'll get that either way. I'm like, the cultural stuff is a lot. The cultural stuff is a lot of stuff that we do. It's a major part of what your child is doing during the day. But of course they want to hear about the reading and writing and the math. So she says, Montessori says about the cultural subjects, she says, we succeeded in teaching history and even pedagogy by the means of reading, and in truth, does not reading embrace everything? Travel stories teach geography, insect stories lead the child into natural science, and so on. So they do, we get asked all this time, why is the students learning the parts of the nematode? Well, it helps them with their reading and writing and just to expose them to what's around them, So lots of this. And I will leave you with one last quote that I liked. It says, the teacher, in short, can use reading to introduce her pupils to the most varied subjects, and the moment they have been thus started, they can go to any limit guided by a single passion for reading. So I think her whole point is that we have to show that reading is exciting, because reading is a real tool that will lead us into a lot of learning. Thank you for watching. Again, if you want to join, it's a free book discussion. And also I have my free resource hub below, and then my scope and sequence, a lot of math and language, different digital things you could print and use in your classroom down below. Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments, maybe you can't make it to this discussion, but let me know if you have any comments or anything that you've read from the passages that maybe I didn't touch on that are interesting about reading and what Montessori says about it. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.